All right, so we're live. Persistent internet issues all day, so just kind of bear with me if it drops in and out. I wanted to go ahead and do this. This is kind of the pilot episode for Blerding While Dad. Actually, it's not, but it kind of is because I'm relaunching the brand. So let me go ahead and get Instagram up and running here. All right, Instagram's with us. What's up, Instagram? Um, So really what blurting while dad is, and I want to kind of explain this concept here. But before I explain the concept, I'm gonna roll my intro because I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Be right back. What's good? I've been planning on doing like a Thursday night or two. Actually, I wanted to do this on Tuesday night and kind of make Tuesday nights my live stream night, but I was working, I was kind of doing some client work on Tuesday night, and I got some client work that I need to kind of finish before tomorrow. So I'm bookending it, and I wanted to do something for myself. Um, Here's the thing. I do a lot of live streaming and a lot of podcasting and all that other stuff. And a lot of it is really for other people or it's for work. For my marketing agency and stuff. And before I even got into this, the way I taught myself how to utilize all this equipment and all this stuff was I have my own podcast called Long Boxing While Black. And it was kind of an intersection to talk about Black nerd culture, politics, all kinds of other stuff under the rainbow, kind of shoehorned into one thing. And I got away from it because one, I got in this mode where I'm like, I don't want to say the wrong thing and offend the wrong audience. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm afraid of being canceled. It's I really do care about making sure that people are represented the right way. And I didn't want to offend anybody or anything, but that's besides the point. I got too far inside my own head about it because I had a pretty good audience for Long Boxing While Black, and I had people that were responding to my stuff. I had a blog post that I was writing. I would write my articles and then do a podcast about it. And I like the podcast format. It was audio only to start out with, but I wanted to incorporate video into it. And so that's where I hit this kind of stagnation point. I was just kind of sitting back and waiting to see what happened. I was hoping that I could create this idea and it would just launch. And what happened was today, I'm going to do it today. I'm going to do it tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. Next week became 3 months. And I never really got back around to re-picking up my podcast. Um, but I always had this kind of earworm, this bug in my ear, like, all right, this bug running around in my brain, skittering around, like, hey, let's do something. Because on Long Boxing While Black, you talked about comic books, you talked about comic book movies, you talked about um like nerd related movies and all that other stuff. But then also I have this entire wealth of like almost 20 years of my career was working group homes and running facilities and teaching parents how to manage their kids and stuff. I have this huge wealth of experience, which is actually longer than my marketing experience, if we're being 100% honest. I know how to manage kids' behaviors, helping parents out in some of their darkest moments and stuff. And so I actually have a lot of hands-on in the trenches experience with that. And so, um, I feel like there's a specific thing to discuss as with Black fatherhood too. I wanted to touch on that. And I have some unique perspectives. I do fear about what is out there for our boys and girls on online and some of the reductive conversations that are happening in this space, specifically in this Black podcast space. Let's keep it buck. Everything is um, reduced down to BS relationship talk and hot takes, and it's from people that a lot of them never have had a successful relationship in their lives. And they're opining about what makes strong relationships and what makes strong marriages and things like that. And then you also have the grifters that infiltrate where they just want to say something controversial so that they can trend on TikTok or Instagram or wherever they're trying to trend. They're trying to get a viral soundbite going. And none of that is beneficial for us. Especially, we're fooling ourselves if we think that, people aren't, kids aren't listening to some of this stuff and getting some ideas just as easily as these kids are getting red pilled and falling down that entire um he-man hate women haters club kind of stuff. And so I wanted to create something for that. So that's what this is. So Blerding While Dad is kind of an anti-red pill space where we can talk black fatherhood, we can talk politics, we can talk comic books, we can talk video games, we can talk about the things that are around black nerd culture, but then also the other aspects of life too that go on with it. So it's kind of a slap together combination of fatherhood, parenthood, parenting stuff, and comic book nerd stuff. And it's whatever my ADHD brain's feeling that specific day. Okay. So it's Blerding While Dad is a space where black nerd culture, fatherhood, masculinity, comic books, counterculture narratives all collide. I'm Brian. I built this because I was tired of seeing conversations stuck between hot takes and hyper masculine nonsense, because that's really what is driving a lot of conversations. And I know why it trends on social media, because it sparks arguments, and things that generate arguments are going to trend on social media. That's just how social media works. So this is for you black nerds. This is for dads. This is for the thinkers, the quiet rebels, and anybody curious. That's what this space is. So I got a couple of things I want to discuss that are kind of general conversations. If you want to jump in, pop in, show some love, leave a comment. I'm with all that. Let's see what you got. Okay. So first things first. I care about these topics because before I started my marketing agency, my entire life was youth care, from the front lines all the way up to building my own programs and managing my own programs. Okay. Um, my kids were a lot of probation kids that had made the wrong choice. And sometimes kids would get jammed up in probation just because there was no other place to put them. Because the state of Nebraska is really really fucked up when it comes to managing some of this stuff. At the time, they've gotten better in some aspects, they've gotten worse in some aspects. At the time, they were trying to privatize parent and family services, and it was an absolute hot shambling disaster of a mess. So a lot of kids got caught up in a system that they didn't really have any control of falling into. I had a kid that ended up getting placed, in the juvenile probation side of things, just because they didn't have any parents on record to pursue. With, they didn't have any parents on record to hold accountable. And so they just started charging him and putting him in jail. That was an entry point into the system. And so I learned a lot in the trenches. I used to get the kids that got kicked out of everywhere else, and I had to figure out, how do I make a living environment for them? And then also, my kids were homeward bound. How do I teach their parents how to maintain these kids and deprogram some of the non-productive things that the parents had learned about managing their kids' behavior? That was my background before then. If I want to get on some braggadocious stuff, I was on work groups to help train, to rewrite training manuals on how to train our staff on how to interact with kids and how to interact with families. Um, I used to, I was on a work group that teaches the principles of behavior and some behavioral modification and adjustment stuff. Like I was, a smarty pants in that realm. And so that's what I did for a long time. And so that's why I want to have these conversations, because I feel like a lot of times when we talk about parenting, we talk about, when we see a parent that's struggling, we just assume that there's a flaw in that parent inherently. And that's not the case. A lot of times we can only work with the tools that we know how to use. And so, from a parenting standpoint, if you aren't aware of how these different tools that other parents use to manage kids' behaviors are, you're going to use the tools you know how best to use. And so, yeah, if I only know how to use a hammer, then that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use the hammer to get the outcome I want. I'll get an outcome. It may not be a great outcome. Sorry if I have internet issues, y'all. I'm trying to get the internet issues resolved, but there's something going on in my neighborhood. So the reality of it is, if I only have a hammer, I'm gonna use the hammer. You could build a house with just a hammer. It's not gonna be a good house. And so my job was giving parents some additional things in their toolkit that they can use to help manage their kids in the home. That was my entire background before I even started all this marketing stuff. And that's been my passion before. I want to see black parents. I want to see black parents thrive and survive in a world that's not really conducive to that. I want to see all parents thrive and survive, but narrowly, specifically, I want to see black parents thrive and survive because I feel like um, there's all kinds of barriers and all these narratives that are running around in the world about you know what black parents do and stuff like that. And some of it's internal stuff that's happening within our community, internal conversations, others external to it. Then we get a good dose of that hyper masculine BS that travels around, that traffics as power fantasies disguised as parenting, and power fantasies disguised as relationships and stuff. And so I want to deprogram some of that. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds of that. I do have a story about a specific, very narrowly specific incident. I talked about it on my podcast, uh, about being a black father and a reality, a juxtaposition, because I was a director of a program at the time when this happened to me. So I'm gonna get into that story in a moment. Let me unpack a little bit more. Okay. The show vision. I'm gonna cover comic books. I do have some comics I want to discuss. I'm gonna cover comic book movies. I haven't seen comic book movies recently, but when I do, I'm gonna discuss them. Talk parenting. I'm gonna talk politics. We gonna touch everything. We're gonna talk about some hip hop. We're gonna talk about the whole nine. Um, Ideally, I do want to have guests. I want to get my internet stuff stabilized before I bring on guests. And so, but I mean, I've had fun with guests before popping on the live stream, and I still want to have those conversations. I think the last time I had a guest was when we were sitting there talking about that young man from Colorado. His name escapes me, Travis Hunter, and just discussing why his relationship was the hot topic for people that didn't have any stakes in his relationship whatsoever, and how weird I thought that entire thing was. A fascination. I was fascinated by how people latched on, had this parasocial relationship with his relationship. It was weird. So we're going to talk about that stuff. I might do some video essay stuff. I got some stuff in mind. It's going to be not live streamy. It's going to be something that's a little bit more formatted and stuff. I don't do well reading scripts. My mind, it moves too fast for scripts. And so these are the kind of topics that I want to discuss. I do have a video essay that I'm kind of working on, just talking about the transition from childhood to adulthood, and a lot of how, specifically kids in my generation, because I need to talk about my generation. We are I'm in that in between spot between Generation X and millennials. We did we were part we had the crime bill. We were the survivors of the crime bill. Our generation was, the crack era. We were the survivors of that stuff. And so I feel like to a degree some of our childhood was abridged. And I have a video essay talking about I thought there'd be more ninjas, and really it talks about how that world of imagination ended up kind of getting short-circuited by reality, and talking about that transition to adulthood and not losing that sense of wonder. So those are some of the topics that I'm going to have. All right. So first things first, I'm gonna tell you a story that might bum you out a little bit. Then I'm gonna go shift into something a little bit more interesting and more fun and engaging. I'm gonna talk about Absolute Batman because I'm all about Absolute Batman, because that's kind of reignited how I perceive the character. But first things first. So I'm gonna tell you about this incident I had as a black father, and it kind of gave form to why I wanted to talk about this stuff in my podcast and now on my live stream. So when my son was I think he had to be kindergarten. He was in the after school program. Both of my kids were in the after school program. And so I had to have my kids picked up by 6. At the time, it was kind of winter season. The sun was going down, so it was dark by 6:00. Go to pick up my son from the after school program. Now, I'm gonna preface this by saying, before, about a week before, we had parent teacher conferences, and I attended parent teacher conferences. I think either I was by myself or it was me and my wife, but I attended parent teacher conference. And so I met all my kids' teachers. This is very important. This point is very important. I met all my kids' teachers. Pick my kids up from the after school program. My son is in the process of a meltdown. Now he's kindergarten, he's throwing a little temper tantrum. What happened was he couldn't calm himself down enough to say it, but what happened was after hindsight being 2020, he had this little lollipop that he had won for doing something good, and it got knocked out of his hand, and he dropped it on his way out of the door, and they were closing up, so he couldn't go back in and get it. And so he's melting down about this lollipop, right? My daughter is, she's kind of used, to, every once in a while he would have his issues. It wasn't like it was ongoing, a persistent thing, but when he had it, when he fell out, when he showed his ass and fell out, he fell out. So I'm getting the kids in the car, and this boy is just crying and yelling and falling out and doing things that 4 and 5-year-olds do when they're upset. And so I'm sitting there putting the seatbelt on him. He's kicking and stuff. He's doing everything to not have the seatbelt on because he's trying to run back up to the door because he thinks that he can get back in and get this lollipop that he had dropped. All of this I'm finding out after the fact. So anyway, I'm dealing with this screaming child, and if you've seen my son and you've seen me, there is no way that you're going to mistake that is my child. Strangers have walked up to me and talked about how much the boy, how we are twins. Okay. So that's something there. So as I'm dealing with this kid in my car, having a complete and utter conniption fit about this lollipop, and then my daughter's cranking up because she's getting upset because the noise is starting to get great on her. And so now I'm about to have 2 screaming kids. My son's kindergarten teacher comes out, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe she can help me de-escalate this situation. She walks up to me. Now, I literally had just met this woman a couple days ago. Like it had not been that long. And I've talked to her before. I've met her before. This is not the first time. This is far from the first time that I'm interacting with her face to face. She walks up to me and looks at me and looks at my son. And so, oh my gosh, what's happening? And I kind of explained. At the time, I didn't know the context of what happened. I had to kind of figure out why he was in this crisis. Teacher walks up. This woman had seen me 1,000 times. I'd just gone to parent-teacher conference. I just had protracted conversations with her, blah, blah, blah. I've talked to her multiple times about stuff and checked in with her. She comes out, sees that my 5-year-old is having this temper tantrum. Oh my God, what's happening? I don't know. Something pissed him off when I brought him out. I'm trying to calm him down, and so we could close the door and start driving home because he's kind of just flailing about. This woman looks at me, looks me in the face, looks at him, looks at me, and says, oh, so do we need to call the police? Why? For what reason? Why would we need to call the police about a 5-year-old having a temper tantrum? So now I'm dealing with a 5-year-old having a temper tantrum, his 6-year-old sister starting to crank up because she's getting upset because he won't stop screaming, and it is upsetting her sense of peace because she doesn't deal with loud noises too well. And then this Miss Teacher out here is asking if the police need to be notified. And I turned around and looked at her. I said, why would that need to happen? Oh, I was just, can I see your ID? I just met you. I don't recall her name now, and I'm not going to out her on here. I just talked to you for a long time. This is my son. Why do you need to see my ID? Why do we need to call the police? He's having a temper tantrum. So I turned around, looked at her. I'm like, we just met less than a week ago. And so she's kind of drawn back. Like, why is he mad about me asking to see his ID and asking if I need to call the police over a 5-year-old having a temper tantrum in my car? My nightmare scenario. I'm in the parking lot of this school with a screaming 5-year-old in the back of my car, and now the police come. And the sun's going down, both of my kids are screaming, and now I have to talk to the police for reasons I don't understand. So now I got layers of existential dread stacked on top of one another. And I'm like, absolutely not. You don't need to call the police. He's having a temper tantrum. I'm trying to let him get it out of his system so I can close the door and drive off. And instantly I went from, okay, dad's going to, ignore the behavior because that's what normally kills the temper tantrum. I had to shift from, I'm going to try to um, ignore this behavior and hopefully it extincts itself and ends on its own by not feeding the monster, to I have to gain control of the situation so I can leave, so I don't have to deal with the police over my son having a temper tantrum, which is age appropriate. So this is where I said I kind of grabbed my sons by the shoulder and said, "You need to stop right now. I don't know what you're yelling about. It's not solving anything. And right now, she's about to call the cops on you for no reason." And here's the tragic part, that scared him. I don't know why my son was scared of that, but it worked as a threat to gain control of his behavior, dial it back a little bit. He is still whimpering and crying, but it stopped all the yelling and stuff. And I was able to put the seatbelt on him and tell the teacher good night and drive home. Who in their right mind sees a small child who's just out of being a toddler, like 5 years old is just out of toddler stage? You don't have the full command of all your words and everything. But who in their right mind sees a toddler have a temper tantrum and their first thought is to call the police or ask if the police need to be contacted? All day, I had dealt with parents and taught them how to manage their kids' behaviors. Um, I had facilitated different things in my shelter so that kids can transition home. And the guy whose entire career it was managing kids' behaviors, I'm sitting in the parking lot with this lady, this white lady. I got to say it, this white lady. And she's basically asking if she needs to call the police because my son is having a temper tantrum because he dropped his lollipop. What kind of weird escalation is that? And the thing that got it under control was she's about to call the police. So how many times has that threat been used against him in school? That was an entire conversation, an entire hour-long topic on long boxing while black, and that kind of inspired me to focus on, I think we need to put parenting topics within this. We need to embed some parenting topics. Okay? But yeah, that's why I wanted to discuss parenthood. I wanted to discuss black parenthood because that was such a bizarre situation, and it felt like I was the control was I was being robbed of my control of a situation that I've dealt with plenty of times. I've dealt with teenagers having temper tantrums, dealt with my kids having temper tantrums. It's not a big deal. But to ask me if she needs to call the police for a temper tantrum, are you fucking serious? It hit me in all the wrong places. And it was really kind of a jarring thing because I'm like, so this is what this boils down to, huh? Crazy. So anyway, that's what kind of inspired talking about parenting issues, because there are these weird barriers that even if you're not jammed up in the system, for a lot of black parents, there's this persistent fear that even if you do everything right, one mistake is going to have those people in your house. Those those people and the state workers and all the other stuff. And I've actually seen it. I've had a case where The case stayed open because the mom openly did not like the caseworker, and she never mentioned any words about openly disliking him, and that's why the case stayed open. She did everything else that she was supposed to do. Black mother. She didn't, but she would not give any ground on, I don't like this dude. I don't like this mother. And I'm not going to pretend like I do. I don't I don't have to be friendly to him in order to do my case. And so I actually had to fight the caseworker on closing her case. It was like, she doesn't like you. There is no bit like her knuckling under to you when she's doing everything else that you've asked of her. That should not be a contingent factor on why her child is still placed outside of the home. That's ridiculous. This is a power struggle between you and her. And the only reason you have this is because you have the weight of the courts behind you, and there's some racial dynamics to this. Because you said she's sassy and she's got an attitude and she's too proud and all kinds of other weird shit that this caseworker has said offhand regarding this mom who just didn't like him. She did not like him. When I went into the house, she was cool with me. She was really cool with my workers. Black, white, whoever. She was cool and cordial with my workers. She did not like how that caseworker treated her. And so he was going to use his power to keep her court involved because he had the power to do it. And I fought him on that. I said, this case needs to be closed. This mom's done everything that you've asked her to do. And the only reason this case is open is because she doesn't like your ass. Her liking you doesn't move the needle, and it doesn't improve the outcomes of this case. It doesn't improve outcomes for her daughter. It doesn't prove that she is a safer home. She doesn't have to kiss your butt, bro. Like, she ain't got to kiss your ass. She can openly dislike you and still do everything else you've asked her to do. And she does. We've evaluated her. She has all the protective capacities. Her daughter's been the one that's been getting in trouble. She's not the one on trial. Why does she have to be nice to you? So you have those kind of weird dynamics when we're talking about, parenting, specifically black parenting. And I'm throwing the black parenting in because dude was throwing in a lot of those real microaggressions with how he's describing mom's behaviors. She's sassy. She's tough. Hard nosed. Like a lot of these things he was tossing in casual conversation and trying to use it as qualifiers for keep inserting his presence in this house well past the time this case should have been closed. This case should have been closed. And so I challenged him on it, and we got the case closed and got the girl back home because there was nothing wrong with mom. Mom wasn't doing anything wrong. It was the daughter's behaviors, and mom had the skills to manage daughter's behaviors. She shouldn't have been placed outside the home in the first place. Anyway, those two things were those two kind of things, they stuck in my heart about why I wanted to talk about black parenting on Blerding While Dad, in addition to comic books and everything. I have a litany of interests, okay? And this is kind of the place that I want to discuss them. So, we off of that. we off of that, right? So, I'm not gonna rant against red pills right now. I don't have the emotional energy to do that right now. I'm going to have episodes where it's anti-red pill. This place is anti-red pill, anti-McGow, anti-black pill, anti-whatever. If you are mad and have a axe and you're carrying this hatred for women or whatever, incel shit, this is not a space for you to be. There are plenty of other places where you can exist. This is not one of those. It's just not one of those. You're not going to like this content. If you are, I hate everything woke and, all this other, this ain't the place for you. We don't have reductive conversations here. If you got axes to carry about, you want to get into, representation in comic books and you have problems with that, this ain't the place for you. Just not. I don't care. There are plenty of places where you can find people talking about stuff that you like regarding that kind of stuff. I don't do that stuff. I don't do this ain't no anti-woke space. This ain't no red pill space. This ain't no men going their own ways. MGTOW, not MGTOW, MGTOW. This ain't no MGTOW spot. This ain't no black pill spot. Um, men's rights spot. This ain't none of that stuff. You're not gonna see me picking fights with there's this trend of influencers that get online and they want to pick fights with women um just for shits and gigs, and I don't uh, yuck. I've seen dudes that get online and pick fights with women on social media just for the interaction. I don't do that stuff. So this is not that kind of space, right? So if you got your axe to grind against, X, Y, and Z, that's not what this is. I want to talk about Black nerd culture because it is a separate nerd culture. We have a unique experience in being Black and nerds, but I also don't want the Black nerds that just really do need to go get therapy so they can get over some of the stuff, and they don't have their agendas, and they don't and they're looking to have an axe to grind with all the people that offended them or isolated them or whatnot. We all went through it, but some of us learned and just kind of adapted and grew up. And so that if you have your axe to grind with specific stuff like that, that's not the place. This ain't the place for you. Okay, I'm off of that. This I feel like this place will take shape as we start getting into the Tuesday night live streams. So let's talk about something that is a little bit more interesting to me. I'm all about the absolute universe in DC. I think it is fantastic. I am 100% on board. Um, I think the Absolute Wonder Woman is dope. I have a harder time getting into it. I think it might be the art style. Um, Absolute Superman is dope. I feel like it's really kind of interesting. I like what they're doing with Martian Manhunter. Uh, I like what they're doing with Flash. Green Lantern is really kind of interesting. But the Absolute book that's the one that I'm really in love with is Absolute Batman, and that shocks me because I have been one of the biggest critics of how Batman's been written for years. Okay. Just I have not been a fan of how Batman's been written. And Absolute Batman, and there are spoilers. There will be spoilers in here. I just need y'all to understand that there's going to be some spoilers to a degree. I'm all the way up until the most recent issue, which is Absolute Killer Croc. Okay. The thing I love about Absolute Batman is it takes the tried and true Batman mythology and turns it on its head. And I don't necessarily like comics that are like, this is the real version of blue. We're going to do grim and gritty. That Mark Miller shit that he did with the Ultimates, where Hulk is a cannibal, and and there's there's incest vibes going on between Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and just yeah, I don't like that. I don't like where we're going to ratchet it up to 11. I don't like Mark Miller's version of reality anyway. I think it's bullshit. I think it's fake. And if you've grown up anywhere where you've actually seen real street violence, Mark Miller stuff is too cartoony. Even Kick-Ass, the comic book, it was a cartoony depiction of American street violence. It was ridiculous. And it wasn't done in an interesting way. It wasn't fun or anything. It was, I'm gonna see how edgy I can get, and how close to the edge I can get. He also had this comic book called The Unfunnies, and it was puerile. It was one of the worst things ever written. Do not go read The Unfunnies. I promise you, do not go read The Unfunnies. It's not even interesting. It's just shock for the sake of shock. And there is no real good writing involved in it. It's just dark and depressing and bleak, and yeah, it's supposed to be that way, but there's nothing redeeming about that book. I think his wife left him behind. She read that and left Mark Miller behind it. So I don't do the grim dark for grim dark. Okay? I just don't. I don't do it. I do like elements of realism in the Batman, or introducing elements of realism into the comic book, but I don't want it to be we're introducing elements of realism, so everything has to be gray toned and depressing, because life isn't like that. There are elements of it that are depressing, there are elements of it that are really good. I don't think that um, we necessarily have realism means that it has to be depressing, dark, bleak storytelling all the time. And Absolute Batman does lean into the bleakness. I'm not going to front. It is kind of a bleak book, but it's done in an interesting way. So if you don't know, with Absolute Batman, one of the things is they've taken Bruce Wayne and they've scaled him up and scaled him down. And you're about to see what I'm saying by this. In Absolute Batman, Bruce Wayne is an absolute monster. Like, he is huge. We're not talking about just muscle. He is 6'9", 400 pounds. He's a construction worker. They removed the element of being wealthy from that book. And it's not something that defines his character. He's a construction engineer, or he's an engineer. He works mostly construction, so it makes sense for him to be a big guy. Okay. He's self-trained, he's self-made. All of his gadgets are things because he has an engineering degree. So he still has his intelligence, he just doesn't have his money. His mom is alive, his dad is dead. And so there are elements of the Batman mythos that are kind of changed around. His rogues gallery are his childhood friends. Like, Penguin is a friend, Catwoman is a friend / love interest that he grew up with. Killer Croc, the guy who played, Killer Croc is a close friend. Edward Enigma, the Riddler, is a friend. Like, it's kind of his crew that he grew up with. And they all witnessed what happened on that day where his father was killed. And so that kind of brought them together, but also drew them apart. So there are elements of it that make sense while they're doing this world building. If you don't know, the absolute universe is a universe where it's built off of the essence of Darkseid. And so there's this evilness in the world, and it's showing the DC heroes in a world that is based upon the evilness of Darkseid. And so you're getting some really interesting storytelling elements, like some thematic elements in it. With Absolute Superman specifically, he didn't come to Earth as a baby. He came to Earth as he grew up on Krypton, and he came as a teenager. And so he's having to go through that entire adjustment period with his powers and everything off of that. And he's still fighting, he's fighting the good fight, but he's not in Metropolis. He's fighting against this evil corporation. I forgot what the name is. It's run by Vandal Savage, but evil corporation that is the evil corporation is Lazarus. And he is helping rebels fight against them in third world countries and stuff. And then he meets Lois Lane, who's a freedom fighter, and blah, 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 blah. Interesting book. Interesting take on the mythos. Absolute Batman is interesting because it's like, what if Batman wasn't rich? And what if he grew up with one parent? What would life look like? What if he didn't have all these other wealth resources to draw upon? And what if he was left to his own devices? What if he didn't have Alfred Pennyworth until he was older? What if he didn't have unlimited money to go train all over the world and do all these martial arts, and he was mostly self-taught? And so that's what the Absolute Batman book is. Really fantastic book. Scott Snyder's knocking it out of the park. Really, there's some hardcore horror elements in this book that really, really work well with some of the enemies that Batman faces. So far, we've seen a monstrous version of Mr. Freeze. We've seen Bane, who, if Batman is huge, Bane is a friggin' giant. We've seen Absolute Killer Croc, and they're hinting towards the Joker. So it's basically, what if Joker had Bruce Wayne's fortune? Right? Right. And the reason why they call him Joker is he never laughs. It's supposed to be a sarcastic send up of him. So these are the things that are happening in that book. And it's a new take on it. You're seeing some things that you recognize from other Batman books, but is kind of breaking the mold. And I really do appreciate the attempt. Like I said, to me, Scott Snyder is my favorite Batman writer. Like, hands down. He's my favorite. He's written all my favorite books, all my favorite Batman books. All my favorite Batman arcs come from Scott Snyder. And so if you get a chance, if you've been off of Batman, I strongly encourage you to go pick up the absolute Batman before DC does the inevitable crossover where they cross the absolute universe over the mainstream DC universe. And here's the thing: I do not want absolute Batman to take backseat to regular old Batman. I just don't. I don't. I don't want that to happen. I don't want the absolute universe. I'm not looking forward to the crossover with the regular DC universe, and they're cooking it. It's coming. I know it's coming. I just don't want it to happen because I think the absolute universe is super, super interesting, and the mainstream universe, the mainstream DC universe, is kind of, it's not really grabbing me. So here's a couple of things about absolute Batman. Absolute Batman is not he doesn't kill. He still has his no killing rule, but he will absolutely maim you. He will maim you. Like, he will absolutely chop off a hand. He'll absolutely gouge out your eyes. He'll spray you with acid. He will cut you. He will stab you. He just won't kill you. He'll do everything short of killing you. And I like that take on Batman. It's basically, what if Batman was Moon Knight with a no killing rule? Right? Interesting. Everybody's been talking about, well, Batman, it's not realistic for him to kill. Okay. He's not killing, but he will hurt you bad. And a lot. He will hurt you a lot. And that's his MO. He grew up in a different kind of Gotham where, it is really kind of this center point of evil, and he has to adjust to that world. So it's a lot harsher. The Bat gadgets are meant to maim and incapacitate. Okay. It's meant to maim and incapacitate. Okay. And so I appreciate that because I don't want my Batman out there killing people. Like the Snyder Murderverse version of Batman who was killing folks. I liked Ben Affleck as Batman, but that Snyder Murderverse Batman, it was so insane. Watching that Batman versus Superman joint, that I have an entire story about it. My wife and I went to go see it, and watching my wife go through the different phases of checking out was really, really amazing. She was confused. Why is Batman killing people? But the absolute Batman, he doesn't pull any punches. And he will maim you. He will hurt you. He's a big, big, big man who will hurt you really, really bad. And so it's really cool. He even has like a battle axe incorporated into his costume, and knives and sharp weapons. So it's not just bat shark repellent kind of stuff. These are actual weapons of combat and stuff. Okay. Them taking on and reimagining some of the villains and how they become who they are in Batman's origin story is really kind of an interesting take on it. There's a lot of story to tell, and they're giving themselves a lot of runway to tell some really interesting world building stuff. And I'm here for it, right? We've been dealing with the same Batman more or less since the 90s. I grew up in where Batman was kind of the first dark mainstream comic. There were still dark mainstream comics. There were still the horror series like Werewolf by Night and stuff, and Marvel and stuff, and the Moon Knight books. But it was one of the early grim and gritty ones that delivered. And then the 90s rolled around and everything became grim and gritty. And Batman, they ended up like, well, Batman's too soft. We need to bring in a Batman who kills people. And then they brought in Azazel, and it was weird. I had that series, I had that run with him, and it was weird. And it was pointless. It made no sense. And it was too dark. When it's Batman, but it's too dark. It was bleak and there was no hope in it, and blah blah blah. I like this balance of where the world is dark and Batman is trying to bring some light to this darkened world. And he's doing it by absolutely brutalizing everybody that's in his way. And the villains are like horror movie villains. Like the Joker, it looks like something out of a horror movie. Bane looks like something out of a horror movie. Okay? Like I said, they've in Absolute Batman, he still does have some of the detective stuff. Alfred Pennyworth is kind of teaching him elements of how to be a detective. In the Absolute Universe, Alfred is more like a secret agent who's been dispatched to Gotham to kind of figure out what the Joker is up to, and trying to forestall some kind of thing, big massive thing that the Joker's been doing. And so he's more secret agent-ish, and so he kind of has his own agenda. And initially he's kind of sent there, and he gets the orders to take down Batman because Batman's kind of interfering with the investigation of the agency he's with. And he ends up partnering with him and kind of taking him under his wing and teaching him some elements of spycraft, which is dope. This is a Batman who is learning. His first the first person he fought was Black Mask, and he got his ass kicked. Batman absolutely got brutalized by Black Mask. And the way they did it, I'm not going to spoil it, but the way they did it with Black Mask, how they made him able to defeat, a 6'9", 400-pound Batman was really, really super interesting. And then how Batman overcame that was also really interesting. Mr. Freeze, he's nightmare fuel. And they made him really, really interesting. Bane is Bane, but turned up to 11. And they're making him very kind of an interesting version of Bane, where he is miles ahead of Bruce. He's miles ahead of the character that's playing Batman. And if Batman in the Absolute Universe is 6'9", 400 pounds, then how big does Bane have to be? Right? And they did it. And they made him look like an absolute unit. He's a monster. He's terrifying. But he also carries that he's not like this brute or anything. And it's kind of like the old comic book version of Bane, where he's just a more experienced version of Batman. And he humbles Batman a lot. So if you're looking to pick up a book, I'm trying not to go into too many spoilers. Absolute Batman really does revisit the Batman mythos. Really, really interesting. It does it in an interesting way. I strongly suggest you pull it. If you've been on the outside of Batman books and you kind of got to where I was, like, this is stupid and this is ridiculous, I think that you need to take stock, and this is your entry point. I'm sad because I know it's going to go away. I know that Absolute Batman is going to end, and to me, it's the most interesting version of Batman that we've had in years. I'm not going to say the same for Absolute Superman. Absolute Superman is really interesting, but the Superman books have actually been kind of interesting in recent years. Like, they've been kind of dope. It's hard for me. I'm going through a hard time because one of my favorite comic book characters is Spider-Man. And the Spider-Man books have been super disappointing. Marvel, I don't know what y'all doing over there with Spider-Man, but it's been trash for like the last 2 years. Spider-Man books have been trash. The mainstream Marvel universe is struggling. Ever since, it's hard, and I'm not saying struggling in that sense, but it's been hard for me to connect with some of it. I was really invested during the Krakoa era with X-Men books. I was 100% on board. I was fine with them transitioning off of Krakoa. I didn't think that needed to be a persistent for everything. What I feel like is they didn't have any plan after they got rid of X-Men all living on the island of Krakoa and having a united mutant nation versus the whole world. I don't think they had a plan for the exit ramp of that because that's been ass. That's been cheeks, bro. That's been terrible, yo. Like all the books have been terrible. They just started getting interesting again, and they're doing another Age of Apocalypse style thing with Age of Revelation, where I'm not going to spoil it, but Apocalypse did find a suitable heir, and so now they're doing the same thing that they did with the Age of Sinister, Age of Apocalypse, where it's kind of an Elseworld, but they're showing what happens 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years in the future. I hope it's something interesting, bro, because Gail Simone's X-Men book has been good. I don't want to completely shit all over that. The Gail Simone's X-Men book has been really good. But Gail Simone's always good. Some of these other X-Men books, Iron Man books have been I just feel like Marvel's kind of adrift right now. The Imperial stuff, like the current one, I can't remember what the current crossover is. Where they're back in outer space and you're dealing with the return of War Hulk and all the galactic stuff that's happening. That's actually interesting. It's kind of drawing me in. But overall, my favorite books, which is weird, are the absolute universe DC books. Go figure. um I haven't been this invested in a title since I started picking up the Transformers when they were on IDW. Okay. um the IDW Transformer books from about 2012 to about 2018 is one of the best runs of comic books. It's one of the absolute best runs of comic books that I've seen in a long, long time. Um, it's one of the most interesting stories. It's the best world building um that I've seen. And um I just if I'm comparing to that, it actually means something because that my level of investment with that was really, really good. I do like the Ultimates. I'm not gonna front. I like where they're going with the new version of the Ultimates. Um, in Marvel, where they have a new Ultimate Universe that the maker has created and kind of made in his own world, and so he went back and kind of prevented all these superheroes from doing stuff. Um, hold, please. I'm gonna take a quick pause for the calls. And we're back. Sorry, had to go off and be a husband real quick. So, if you're looking for my comic book heads, if you're looking for an entry point, start with Absolute DC Universe. You can't go wrong with Absolute books. I would start with Absolute Batman because to me it's the most interesting one. Absolute Wonder Woman's dope. Absolute Green Lantern's dope. Absolute Manhunter, bring a lunch, but it's interesting, kind of multi-layered with different storytelling, thematic elements. Is really kind of an interesting book. You have to bring your brain to that one. Absolute Flash is dope. But start with Absolute Batman. And understand that it's not going to be around forever. It's the best thing that DC has done, and it's going away. Which is the case for everything. Absolute Universe is going away. It's really, really super interesting. But, it's depressing. Because anytime we get something that seems to upset the status quo or seem to be really interesting, it's not going to be around for much longer, which is very, very frustrating. But I want you to pick that up. I do want you to, if you get a chance, the new Ultimates is really good. The current run of the Ultimates is good. Where they have Ultimate Black Panther, they're kind of reimagining some stuff within his mythos. The Ultimates, which is basically the Avengers, they're reimagining some things in their mythos. The Absolute Fantastic Four, I think it was a kind of a one shot. That was some really, really dark shit. Depressing, and it's hard to watch some of my favorite characters get jacked up like that. But that was good. For those that don't know, the ultimate version, the ultimate version of Reed Richards is basically Doctor Doom. He's called the Maker. He's basically evil version of Reed Richards, and he's responsible for this new version of the Ultimate Universe. He found an Earth to make his own, and what he did was he went through and prevented all the superheroes from experiencing the events that made them superheroes. So he made sure that Peter Parker wasn't bit. He made sure that Thor was in prison before he came to Earth. Like, there's all kinds of different things that he did to remove them, pull them out of the narrative. And so now Tony Stark, the young Tony Stark, is going through and reintroducing these heroes to the new world. So Spider-Man's an adult with a wife and kids before Tony Stark presents him with the radioactive spider and gives him his powers. So he's still learning how to use his powers. He's also balancing having a wife and kid. He also has Uncle Ben. Aunt May is dead, but he has Uncle Ben. Interesting. Oh, that's the one. Ultimate Spider-Man is dope. Like the new Ultimate Spider-Man is dope. And they did do a crossover where they brought Miles Morales over there. And so he gets to be the veteran Spider-Man in that universe. And it was really interesting to see how the newish adult Spider-Man has to deal with this teenager Spider-Man who's far ahead and has years of crime fighting experience. Jump in there. I guess my frustration is this shit is going to be over. It's ending. It's not going to last. It's going away. It is frustrating because we're going to go back to the same lame Spider-Man books in the main Marvel universe that have been cheeks for the last 3 years. Cheeks. Only problem is my only problem with the new Ultimate Universe is how they're doing Ultimate Luke Cage. I know that they're like he's been wrongfully accused. He's in prison. Okay. He's gone through the experiment. He has the Luke Cage powers, blah, blah, blah. But he's been wrongfully accused, and he's been incarcerated based on the threat that he presented to the Maker's plans. And so his entire story is based around being in prison and basically traveling from jail to jail and creating an uprising. I understand it's supposed to be anti-incarceration. I do. But it's hard. I know that the story is supposed to hit the notes of being not just prison reform, prison abolishment. I understand that that's the narrative they're going with. And Luke Cage is a liberator in the truest sense of the word. He's going through to these prisons where they have all these political prisoners and educating them and teaching them how to organize and stuff, and basically overthrowing the prison structure and basically building an army there. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it so much. I love it and I hate it at the same time. Um, because it falls into the weird tropes of, well, he also is very articulate. I just hate it so much because it leans into a stereotype and then tries to turn it, turn it upside down. But it's just, ugh. Luke Cage gotta be in prisons. And I know the old school books, old school Luke Cage books, they started out as kind of you know, black exploitation. Like it was trying to mimic what was happening in the black exploitation film and kind of doing Marvel's version of Shaft. And so he was being locked up by the man and being persecuted by the man and blah blah blah. And he talked like the way he interacted, the way he spoke was like this, I don't know how to put it. Um kind of overblown cartoony version of what black slang looked like. It was a white writer writing for a black person in the 70s, and you know how that sounds. There's a lot of jive talking and shit like that. I understand it. I was a huge Luke Cage fan. I still am. I'm a Luke Cage mark. My mom put me on the Luke Cage when I was little, and I had Luke Cage, I had Power Man and Iron Fist, I had the Luke Cage short-lived Luke Cage series that came out in the 90s, where they tried to just make it Cage. And I also had the one where the Punisher became black and he was with Luke Cage, and it was really, really creepy and weird. Um, I think this is my signal to get off because now Chrome is crashing on me. I'm gonna close some of these tabs here. But absolute Luke Cage, the fact that he has to be in prison just drives me nuts. I understand what they're trying to say. I understand what they're trying to do. I just hate it so much. Um, but I hope they do something interesting, because they even gave him the ability to. The Ultimates are going to free you, and you can be part of the team. And he's like, no, I have to do my work in jail, and so he goes around liberating all these prisons. It just feeds into too many stereotypes. I hate it so much. God, I hate it. And I love the character. I love the entire other story. I like all the stuff they're saying. It just, ugh. But anyway, if you're looking for an entry point into Marvel, start with the Ultimates right now. The current Ultimates run is crossing over. I think it's Bendis. I think it's a Brian Michael Bendis crossing over into the Gods thing that he tried and everybody was confused by. I like Bendis. I really do. I like Michael Bendis. The Gods thing was cheeks. I'm sorry. It was bad. Or was it, no, was it Bendis? It wasn't Bendis who did that, was it? No, it wasn't. It couldn't have been. Who did Gods? Who wrote that? Anyway, um, oh, it's Hickman. Yes, Hickman. Sorry, Brian Michael Bendis. I mean, I love your writing too. I love Bendis. I love Bendis speak. Hickman. Um, Jonathan Hickman did Gods, and they're crossing that over with the Ultimate Universe, and yeah, we'll see what happens with it. We'll see what happens with it. I tried to follow that Gods book, and that was yeah. That was interesting. That was an interesting little experiment. Like we're trying to introduce John Constantine into the Marvel universe. Like Marvel now has its own version of John Constantine, and it doesn't need its own version of John Constantine. It really does not. But that's what that was. And so yeah. So I hope I'm trying to enjoy the absolute DC universe and the ultimate Marvel universe while they last, because they ain't around. I think the ultimate Marvel universe will last. Maybe. I know the absolute DC universe has to go away because they're going to have to narrow it down and veer back into the main DC universe. There's no way around it. There's no way that they're going to have a more awesome version of Batman. You know, the Batman that exists in the mainstream DC universe can't hold a torch to how incredible Absolute Batman is. Even though Absolute Batman's untrained, even though he doesn't have all the money in the world and stuff, he has to use construction equipment and stuff and whatever he can steal. And he has to use vacant buildings because he's a civil engineer. And so he knows where all the vacant buildings are. And he can study blueprints and stuff. And that's his bat cave is essentially all over the city. Any vacant building that's in the city can be his bat cave. And he's 6'9" and 400 pounds. So he can't really sneak around. And yeah, they've kind of tried to hide his identity, but not too well, because you can't hide 6'9". You can't disguise 6'9", 400 pounds as something else. I don't know how that Batman survives in the regular DC universe, because he outshines the current Batman in every single way. He's way more. The new Batman is way more interesting than the one that's been around. I just got to say it. And it breaks my heart that he's not going to last. The new Superman is more interesting. And stuff like that, but it's just not carrying a torch. Anyway, y'all, I've ranted enough about comic books and stuff like that. Thanks for those that have popped in. I'm gonna try to make this a regular Tuesday night thing. And I need to figure out this internet thing because it's driving me nuts. It's preventing me from doing all kinds of other stuff. Appreciate y'all tuning in. I got to get to getting. I got a child that I need to pick up from somewhere. So thank you for tuning in. We're going to be talking parenthood. We're going to be talking comic books. We're going to be talking all that other stuff on this platform. And it's really aligned with how my brain works. Okay. I'm going to probably be doing a Patreon and stuff and all that other stuff, but I want to build out the community first. Okay. So anybody could participate. Just understand that this ain't for you if you're looking to, talk about alpha male and, masculine, all that other bullshit that comes in this space, that all this other, stuff like that. We're talking about black masculinity, but not in the way that is currently being discussed in online spaces, because I think it's reductive. Thank you for tuning in. I'm probably going to do a little bit more of a review of, maybe we can start with the Spider-Man books and the Batman books, because those are the ones that are actually, I think I want to do the Ultimates, the new version of the Ultimates and the new Batman books, and just kind of go issue by issue to get y'all up to speed on those, and tell you what's happening in those. Because like I said, if it's good enough for me to want to pick back up comic books, it's good enough for me to share with the fam. And so yeah, that's what I'll do. And so that's what's in my stack. The Absolute Batman is currently in my stack, and all the Ultimate stuff is in my stack. Okay. I appreciate y'all. I'm gonna check y'all out. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Blerding While Dad. Thank you for giving the intermittent internet issues. I'll get them fixed. I'll talk to y'all later. Be easy. Take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. That's been the message I've had to use. I've had a rough couple of weeks, and so a lot of it is being kind to myself internally. So be kind to yourself. Talk to y'all later. Love y'all. Talk to you. Peace.